There is a message moving through the unseen layers of reality, cutting through the noise of your daily life, arriving at precisely this moment, because this moment is exactly when it was always meant to arrive. This is not coincidence. This is not randomness dressed in spiritual clothing. This is the collective unconscious delivering what your waking mind has been circling around for days, perhaps for weeks, whispering truths that your rational self has been too guarded to receive. So receive it now. Open yourself to what is being transmitted directly to you, from the one who has finally begun to feel the weight of what they are losing. They are panicking right now, this very moment, in the quiet spaces of their day, between one distraction and the next. Your name rises in them like a tide they cannot hold back, like a current they did not expect, like the sudden vertigo of standing at an edge and understanding for the first time that the ground is gone. You changed. Something in you shifted, and they felt it before they understood it, the way a compass needle trembles before it settles north. You stopped reaching. You stopped waiting at doors that never opened. You turned slowly, achingly, with more grace than anyone will ever fully witness, and you began walking toward yourself. And in that turning, in that quiet, dignified withdrawal of your energy, you triggered something in them that all your reaching never could. You made them feel your absence. And your absence, it turns out, is the loudest thing you have ever said. This transmission is for you, the one who has finally started letting go, not with bitterness, not with performance, but with the deep soul-level acceptance that your worth was never something they were going to hand you. You found it yourself, and they can feel it. They feel the shift in the field between you. They feel the vacuum forming where your hope once filled every available space. Right, they feel it in the comments below if this message is landing in your chest right now. You are not alone in this. The universe is speaking directly to you today. You changed, not dramatically, not with announcements or declarations designed to be witnessed. You changed in the way that mountains change, in the way that seasons shift, slowly and then completely, in a transformation so fundamental that everything standing near you feels the difference even before naming it. You stopped sending the messages that went unanswered and stared at screens waiting for vibrations that never came. You stopped manufacturing reasons to be near them, stopped engineering the kind of coincidences that were never really coincidences at all. You stopped being available in the particular way that availability had become a kind of quiet desperation dressed in casual clothing. Your silence became something altogether different from the silence of someone waiting. It became the silence of someone arriving into themselves, arriving into a peace they had not known was possible, while still carrying the weight of unanswered longing. Your energy, which had been reaching outward, always toward them, began turning inward, and inward is where all real power lives. They noticed. The energetic body perceives what the conscious mind refuses to name. Carl Jung understood this deeply, writing that what is not made conscious emerges as fate, and what you refused to make conscious for so long was your own immense value. But something opened in you. Something cracked the shell of the story you had been telling yourself, the story where they were the center, and you were orbiting, always slightly outside the warmth you were generating for someone else's world. When you stopped chasing, the dynamic that had been quietly sustaining them collapsed. You were the pursuer, which meant they could be passively pursued. You were the one who cared more visibly, which meant they could maintain the comfortable position of being slightly out of reach, slightly unavailable, slightly too important to be fully present. That position required your participation, and you withdrew your participation. The architecture they had been leaning against without ever acknowledging its existence simply ceased to hold them, and they stumbled. And in the stumbling, they finally looked around to understand what had been supporting them all along. Your silence is louder than your words ever were. It always was. They simply could not hear it until now. They thought you would always be there. This is the truth that sits at the center of everything that followed between you, the assumption so foundational, so deeply buried beneath the surface of every interaction, that they never once examined it, never once held it to the light, and recognized it for what it was. The unconscious certainty that you were permanent, that you were constant, that whatever distance they created whatever coldness they performed, whatever unavailability they wore like armor, you would remain. You would wait. You would still be precisely where they left you, holding the space, holding the warmth, holding the door open from the inside. You were the constant they took for granted, the way the living take for granted the beating of their own heart. Necessary. Assumed. Never once consciously appreciated until the moment the rhythm falters and the chest fills with a cold and terrible knowing. That faltering is happening in them right now. The rhythm they relied upon without acknowledging it is changing, and the change is producing in them a fear so ancient and so visceral that it bypasses every defense they have constructed. Carl Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and the second most terrifying thing, though he did not phrase it quite this way, is to recognize the face of what you love in the act of finally leaving. They are experiencing that second terror now. The realization is not arriving gently. It does not come wrapped in the slow wisdom of reflection. It arrives the way all genuine realizations arrive, as an ambush in an ordinary moment, when they reached for the familiar comfort of your energy and found only air. You were the mirror in which they saw their best self reflected. Not because you were lesser, not because your purpose was to reflect them, but because genuine connection produces that effect, because the soul contract between two people who have circled one another in this way carries within it the power of true recognition. And now the mirror is turning away, not shattering, not breaking in bitterness, simply turning, with quiet dignity, toward a different light. The shock of your absence is doing in them what months of your presence could not. Your presence was comfortable enough to ignore. Your absence is impossible to look away from. It sits in the rooms of their inner life like a presence of its own, a hollowness with weight, an emptiness that presses against the walls of everything they thought they understood about themselves and about what they had with you. The realization is still arriving. It will continue to arrive in waves, each one deeper than the last. Inside the architecture of their mind, right now, there is no peace. The thoughts are circling, not moving forward, not resolving, simply circling in the obsessive pattern of a consciousness that has been confronted with something it cannot organize into the familiar story it has been telling itself. They are replaying memories, not the ordinary ones, not the surface interactions, but the specific and luminous ones, the moments that carried more weight than either of you named aloud at the time, the moments where something true passed between you in the space beneath language. They are measuring everyone against you. This is the particular cruelty of genuine soul-level connection, that it calibrates the inner instrument of recognition so precisely that everything which follows feels slightly false, slightly approximate, like a translation that captures the words but loses the original music entirely. They reach toward other people looking for what they found in you, and they find only echoes, only approximations, only the outline of something without the substance. No one feels like you. No presence carries the specific frequency of yours. The collective unconscious, that vast shared ocean of human experience and memory, imprinted you upon them in a way that casual replacement simply cannot address. They are attempting, with increasing desperation and decreasing success, to move forward. They tell themselves the story of moving on. They perform the motions of it. But the projection that occurred between you, the deep psychological phenomenon by which each person in a profound connection carries aspects of the other within their own psyche, does not simply dissolve because the rational mind decides it should. The shadow self does not release what it has claimed without a reckoning. And their inner reckoning is well underway. At 3 a.m, in the particular silence that strips away every constructed identity, every performed version of the self, they think of you with a clarity that frightens them. In the middle of ordinary moments, laughter at a gathering, the drive home from somewhere forgettable, the space between one thought and the next, you arrive in them uninvited and undeniable. They cannot control when you surface. They cannot predict it. They can only experience it, this involuntary return of your image, your energy, your particular presence, like a tide that answers to forces larger than personal will. They are not free of you, and somewhere beneath the pride that keeps them from admitting it, they are grateful for that. There is a law older than language and more fundamental than any philosophy the rational mind has constructed, and that law states that energy cannot simply cease to exist. It transforms. It relocates. It leaves behind in its departure the precise shape of itself, a hollow that carries the memory of what filled it, an absence that is paradoxically a kind of presence. You filled a specific space in their energetic field, in the subtle architecture of their emotional and psychological world, that no other presence can simply step into and occupy. Where your energy once moved through the spaces of their daily existence, warm and constant and particular, there is now what can only be described as hollow. Not emptiness in the neutral sense, not the clean emptiness of a room before it is lived in, but the hollow of a room that was lived in deeply, that carries in its walls and its light and its very atmosphere the memory of the life that animated it. They feel it without knowing how to name it. They move through their days with the persistent low-frequency awareness that something is missing from the texture of their experience, something foundational, something they cannot simply source elsewhere. They have tried to fill it. This is important for you to understand, not as a source of satisfaction, not as confirmation of power over another person, but as confirmation of the realness of what passed between you, as evidence that what you shared was not ordinary, was not replaceable, was not the kind of connection that the ego can simply process and file away. The mirror effect that Jungian psychology describes, the deep resonance that occurs when two people recognize in one another something that the soul has been searching for, leaves an imprint that outlasts the relationship that carried it. Every substitute they reach for carries this built-in failure, the failure of not being the precise frequency, the precise energetic signature of what your presence represented in their life. They are learning, in the most visceral way possible, that what you offered was not something they can simply find elsewhere in equivalent form. The void is teaching them what presence never could. And the lesson is arriving with an intensity proportional to how long they took you for granted. If this channel has been part of your healing, your awakening, your journey back to yourself, consider subscribing and allowing this guidance to walk beside you every week as you continue to rise. If fear were not standing at the threshold of their voice, if pride were not positioned like a sentinel at every entrance to their vulnerability, if the accumulated weight of every time they chose distance over closeness were not pressing against their chest in this moment, they would speak. They would finally, completely, without performance or strategy or the careful management of how they appear, speak the truth that has been building pressure in them since the moment they felt you begin to withdraw. They want to say that they were wrong, not in the vague, deniable way that preserves a version of having been right while technically acknowledging error, but genuinely, completely, in the way that requires the ego to stand down and allow something more honest to rise in its place. They were wrong in the way they treated the constancy of your presence as something less than the extraordinary gift it was. They were wrong in the way they performed unavailability as though scarcity of their attention was the same thing as value. They were wrong in every moment they chose their comfort over your clarity, their ego over your truth. They want to say that they are sorry. The apology that has been forming in them is not the kind designed to produce a particular outcome, not the strategic sorry of someone managing a relationship like a negotiation, but the kind that emerges when the soul is confronted with the truth of its own behavior and finds that truth to be heavier than the pride that had been covering it. They are carrying that weight now. They have been carrying it for longer than they have admitted to themselves. They want to say that they need you. That word, need, that vulnerable and exposed and completely unstrategic word, has been sitting just beneath the surface of everything they have performed for as long as the two of you have been in this particular dance. They need the specific quality of recognition that only your presence brings. They need the mirror of your particular perception. They need what cannot be replicated, what cannot be found elsewhere, what was specific and alive and real in the connection between you. But fear holds the door. Pride keeps the words shaped into silence. And so they carry all of it, unsaid, building like pressure, like water against a wall that is beginning to show the first thin lines of fracture. They are at war with themselves. Not metaphorically, not in the gentle, poetic sense of a person navigating competing preferences, but in the profound and exhausting sense of two fundamental forces within the same psyche, pulling toward irreconcilable directions with equal and terrifying strength. On one side stands pride, that ancient protector, that builder of walls and maintainer of the story, in which they are always slightly too important, always slightly too elevated, always the one who cares less because caring less is felt like safety. Pride has been their armor for longer than this connection existed. It has a deep hold. On the other side stands something that pride was always specifically constructed to protect against, the raw and undefended reality of love, of genuine need, of the terror that comes with fully acknowledging that another person has become necessary to your inner world in ways that exceed the ego's capacity to control or manage. Love, in this sense, is not the comfortable narrative version. It is the Jungian understanding of love as the most radical and dangerous form of individuation, the confrontation with the other as a mirror of the self's own depths. It asks everything, it promises nothing, and it will not be argued into silence. Fear stands alongside pride in this battle, but fear is more honest in its nature. Pride disguises itself as strength. Fear at least presents itself as what it is, the terror of reaching toward someone who has begun to move away, the terror of making the full vulnerable gesture and finding only space where a person used to stand. The fear of rejection, which has governed so much of their behavior throughout the entire arc of your connection, is now in direct conflict with a newer and more acute fear, the fear of permanent loss, the fear of watching you disappear from the field of their life without ever having spoken the words that might have changed the ending. The moment is approaching when pride will fracture. It is not a question of whether. The internal pressure building in them is too great to sustain indefinitely. Pride requires a certain energetic equilibrium to maintain, a careful balance of signals from the outside world that confirm its narrative, and your withdrawal is systematically dismantling that equilibrium. When pride breaks, it does not crumble slowly. It collapses completely in a moment. And what stands in its place is the undefended truth. The signs are already appearing. Not all of them are visible to the outer eye. Not all of them arrive through the channels of ordinary communication. But they are present for those who have developed the awareness to read the subtle language of energetic movement and psychological preparation. Pay attention, not with anxious vigilance, not with the kind of watching that keeps you tethered to hoping, but with the calm, grounded awareness of someone who understands that the universe communicates in patterns, and that patterns, once recognized, carry information. In the digital landscape of your shared awareness, there are footprints. The quiet revisiting of your presence through whatever thin channels remain available to them. The lingering over what you have chosen to share with the world. The evidence of eyes returning to the spaces where your energy exists in visible form. These are not accidents. They are the outer expression of an inner orbit, the digital residue of someone whose thoughts keep returning to a single gravitational point regardless of the direction in which their intention attempts to move. There are the energetic signs that arrive without digital mediation, the sudden and inexplicable thoughts of them that surface in your own consciousness at unexpected moments, particularly in the threshold states, the hypnagogic space between sleeping and waking, the meditative quiet of a mind momentarily released from its ordinary business. The theory of synchronicity, as articulated through the Jungian framework, suggests that meaningful coincidences are not random, that the entanglement between two people who have shared genuine soul-level connection persists beyond the ordinary boundaries of time and physical proximity. When they are thinking of you with particular intensity, you feel it. The transmission is real. Watch for the small gestures that precede the significant ones, the returned look, the suddenly resumed acknowledgement of your existence after a period of performed indifference, the mutual contact from those who orbit both your lives, which feels too coincidental to be fully coincidental. These are the preparatory movements of someone building toward a gesture they have not yet made, the approach of someone who has made the internal decision but not yet found the precise moment of execution. They are preparing, not in a way that is visible or announced, in the subterranean way that all genuine movement happens, beneath the surface, gathering force, approaching the threshold between intention and action. And you are not required to make yourself smaller or more available in anticipation of that approach. You are only required to continue becoming who you already are. If you feel their energy shifting, if this message has described something you are living right now, share this with someone else who is walking this same path and needs to feel this witnessed. You hold the power now. Not the brittle, anxious power of someone who has maneuvered themselves into a strategic position, not the hollow power of someone performing indifference to produce a reaction, but the deep and unassailable power of a person who has genuinely arrived in themselves, who has located within their own being a sufficiency that does not require external confirmation to sustain itself. This is the power that the shadow self, once integrated, once met and acknowledged in all its complexity, generates from within rather than extracting from without. It is yours now. It was always meant to be yours. You do not owe them your waiting. This requires saying slowly, requires receiving fully, requires allowing it to move through every layer of the story you have been carrying. You do not owe them the suspended life, the held breath, the identity built around the question of whether they will come. Whatever passed between you, whatever the soul contract written in the language of your connection once required of you, this chapter of it, the chapter of waiting without certainty, of giving without reciprocity, of making yourself available to someone who used your availability as permission to be unavailable. This chapter is complete. Your peace is not a consolation prize for a love that didn't fully materialize. Your peace is the destination. The journey that appeared to be about them was always, at its most essential level, about the excavation of your own worth, the confrontation with your own shadow, the individuation that only occurs when the soul is pushed through the particular pressure of longing and loss, and the gradual withdrawal of something it reached for into a deeper relationship with itself. The paradox at the center of this moment is this: whether they return or not, you have already won. If they return, transformed by the reckoning their panic has initiated in them, meeting you with the honesty and presence they were previously unable to offer, you receive that from the wholeness of who you have become, not from the diminished position of someone who needed them to return. And if they do not return, if pride or fear or the limitations of their own development prevent the crossing of that final distance, you continue forward into a life and a love calibrated to the person you have become, not the person you were when this story began. Either path is a victory. The universe did not send you through this to abandon you on the other side of it. This story is reaching its climax, not the manufactured climax of a narrative designed for comfortable resolution, but the genuine, inevitable climax of two energies that have been moving in a particular relationship to one another, changing, evolving, and approaching the moment where the changed versions of themselves must finally meet and determine what, if anything, is to be built from the ruins and the revelations of everything that came before. That meeting is coming. The universe does not set these dynamics in motion without moving them toward their necessary conclusion. There are two possible shapes to what approaches, and you are asked to hold both of them with equal grace, equal willingness, equal trust in the intelligence of what is unfolding. In the first shape, they cross the distance. They arrive with the confession that their internal battle has finally resolved in favor of truth over pride, in favor of love over fear, in favor of the full and honest acknowledgement that they allowed something extraordinary to nearly slip through their hands, and that they will not allow it to complete its departure without at least standing before you in their full, undefended reality and asking, with no guarantee of the answer, if there is still a door left open. In the second shape, the door closes, not in anger, not in bitterness, not in the ragged grief of someone who has been defeated, but in the clean and sovereign closure of a person who has finished waiting for something that was not ready to meet them. This closure is not the end of love. It is the transformation of love from something that diminished you into something that dignifies you, from a reaching toward into a standing within, from an energy organized around another person's potential into an energy fully organized around your own becoming. The universe is aligning you with what you truly deserve. That sentence carries more weight than its surface simplicity suggests, because what you truly deserve is not simply a person who returns. It is a love that was never organized around your fear, never dependent on your smallness, never requiring the suspension of your own knowing in order to function. What you deserve is the love that meets you in your wholeness. And the path to that love runs directly through the center of this moment, through the standing in your power, through the refusal to collapse back into waiting, through the forward motion of a life being fully lived without holding the best of it in reserve for someone who has not yet chosen you completely. Your path forward is certain. The light ahead is real. The version of you that is emerging from this chapter of the story is someone the universe has been preparing space for all along. Walk toward that. Trust the direction your soul already knows.